They are presented by the Harvey B. Gantt Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Dexter Wimberly, and we have another great guest today. Alvin C. Jacobs Jr. is a photographer and image activist based in Charlotte, North Carolina. A native of Rockford, Illinois, Jacob is known for his powerful black and white documentary work that centers communities often overlooked or misrepresented. Raised near the world's oldest family-owned Harley-Davidson dealership, he was immersed in motorcycle culture from an early age and deeply influenced by his father's motorcycle clubhouse, which was established in 1977. These early experiences fostered a lasting connection to the Black biker community, one he continues to document through his lens. Jacobs sharpened his photographic practice on the front lines of America's social justice movements, capturing pivotal moments in cities such as Ferguson, Minneapolis, New York, and Charlottesville. His signature aesthetic, defined by stark contrast and monochrome tones, reflects a commitment to visual storytelling rooted in clarity and urgency. He contributed to the award-winning exhibition No Justice, No Peace at the Levine Museum of the South. In 2018, as artist in residence at the Harvey B. Gantt Center, he created Welcome to Brook Hill, an acclaimed visual narrative of Charlotte's historic Brook Hill village. The project earned him recognition as one of Charlotte Magazine's Charlatans of the Year and Creative Loafing's Best Photographer of 2018. His current exhibition, Black Behind Bars, The Untold Story of Black Biker Culture, is currently on view at the Harvey B. Gantt Center through September 21st of this year. Without further ado, let's welcome Alvin C. Jacobs to today's conversation. How are you?
Hello. Oh, good. How are you guys?
Doing well, doing well. Happy you were able to join us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And in the interest of time, I want to kind of just jump right into it. I'm going to do things maybe slightly out of sequence here because I want to make sure we get to the really, really key things. But I think it would be important to start with your roots. Maybe you can kind of tell us about growing up in Rockford, Illinois, around biker culture, and how that shaped your perspective as an artist. I think that's a good place to start.
Man, growing up in Rockford, Illinois, imagine the close proximity to a large metropolis. Rockford is
Sure.
about 90 miles north of Chicago. It's close, but it's a million miles away as far as everything else, as far as cultural, as far as appearance, even logistics. But growing up about a mile away from the oldest family-owned Harley Davidson dealership in the world gave me a unique perspective, not of just motorcycle culture, right, but of American culture. Because usually when you think of black bikers, like first and foremost, you don't, well, bikers, you don't think of us, right? You don't think of black men, you don't necessarily think of black women. So there was also a gentleman who lived in my neighborhood who built motorcycles. I mean, on my same block. So I was growing up around this culture my entire life, in addition to my father's clubhouse opening in 1977. I was born in 1974.
No, that's really great. And I have a sort of fun question that connects to that. And so your current's really like powerful title. And what does that mean? And how did that project come to be?
You said the title?
Yeah, how did that where did the title come from, and how did the project come to be?
The title of Black Behind Bars?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, with full transparency, I wanted a provocative sentence, right? I wanted you to think of something that was not only powerful, but that had ties to the actual photography exhibition. Black Behind Bars is a triple entendre. It came about because first, it was behind the bars of an actual motorcycle. So you think Black Behind Bars, that's the first thing you think. Or maybe it's the second thing you think. There's also a proverbial mental prison, being behind the bars of your own mental prison. Three is recidivism, right? So behind the bars of an actual prison. So it's a triple entendre if you give it a little bit of time. So it's behind the bars of a motorcycle, behind the bars of a mental prison, and behind actual physical bars of an actual prison.
I got it, got it. You describe yourself as an image activist.
Yes, sir.
What does that mean to you? Like, how does that shape the way you approach photography?
When I learned in, I believe it was 2009, when I first started documenting social justice events, I knew that Gordon Parks was my hero. I knew that the way Dawood Bey would photograph life, I wanted to simulate, but also not do any harm. So I didn't take a Hippocratic oath, but I was like, I cannot just parachute into these communities, document, throw the peace sign, and keep it moving. I wanted to be a part of the work, but I also wanted to be a part of the help. So when I would document protests, it would always be from a lens of what if I was the subject? What if I was the individual being documented? How would I feel? You still have a job to go to. You still have a career that you're responsible for, a family that you have to take care of. And just because you're at a protest or you're in a space, a public space, absolutely. I wanted to make sure that I took care of those subjects, even though I didn't know them. So being an image activist was using my camera as an activist because I wasn't an organizer then, right? I wasn't a philanthropist then, but I knew that I could show up in an art space and create conversations around what I saw in front of me and deliver those on platforms around the United States of America.
What attracted you to in black and white?
You know how I think we're close enough to the same age that we can look at a photograph and we can almost tell at least a decade by the temperature of the photograph. You can look at it and be like, okay, that's got some orange hues, that's got some yellow hues, that's got some blue in it. You can track it down to around 1970 something, 1980 something, 1990 something, 2000 and something. With black and white, outside of the outfit or the wardrobe, you really don't know unless there's a landmark or if there's a vehicle. You don't know if there's a particular timestamp or not. And I wanted to begin documenting without a decade. I just wanted it to be about the subject of the work. So black and white really spoke to me, and it enabled me to shoot, um, enabled me to capture subjects that made less sense if it was lit correctly, because it could be natural light, it could be 12 o'clock, in the morning, or 2 o'clock in the morning, or however, when I was at a protest. I didn't want the temperature to affect the quality of the photograph. So I started documenting in black and white first. But I photograph in color and then I edit to black and white. So I don't shoot in black and white, edit it to black and white, but I also reserve the files in color first.
Oh, I see, I see. That's really, really fascinating. Going back to the exhibition currently on view at the Gantt Center. So how did your own experiences, in bike culture influence like what's in the show? Can we talk a little bit more about the I know there's a theme that's sort of connected to mental health as well,
Yes.
and just wanted to hear a little bit more about the background on the exhibition.
So I wrote, well, this is about 2 years ago. I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the Harley Davidson Museum. I was having a ball. I was surrounded by all the things that I actually care about: art, photography, motorcycles, memorabilia, but there weren't really any black people. And remember, I said that my father's exhibition, or I'm sorry, my father's club was launched, was started, was founded in 1977. And I found it odd and kind of off-putting that there wasn't an African American presence there, with the exception of brother Freddie Franklin, or Frederick Franklin, who's in the exhibition. His motorcycle, Blackula, was in the actual exhibition, but that was the only piece that I could find within the exhibition. I was there for well over 3 hours. So if you remember the movie Do the Right Thing, and when
Mhm.
Bugging Out was talking to Sal, he said, Sal, how come ain't no black people on the wall? And Sal was like, this is my place. You want black people on the wall, you get your own place. So I decided not to even ask, right? Not to even inquire. I just wanted to make sure that the art that I knew how to create had a platform. So after that day, I decided that I wanted to start creating the work. After that day, I decided that I wanted to start building my own archive of African American black bikers specifically, and immerse that and insert that into the culture. So it came from not seeing us, at the mecca of American motorcycles in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I grew up, I don't know, 2 hours away from.
And then this theme of mental health and how that kind of connects to
Mhm.
biker culture, at least through the framework of the exhibition. Can you share a little bit about
Yes, sir. So there is something called throttle therapy. With the way your mind and the way your energy and the way vibrations are connected to an engine. And the more you roll on that throttle, specifically a motorcycle, not even so much as a vehicle, but the more you roll on that throttle, the more connected you are to what's going on around you, to the elements, but you kind of zone out. There have been times where I don't need a drink. I don't need to go for a run or a jog, or I don't need, to enjoy a cigar. I need to ride my motorcycle. Sometimes those are the clearest connections I have to my own spirit, to my own soul, and I just get free. The longer I ride, the more I think, the better I feel. Even if it's just transportation, even if it's just A to B, even if I'm just going to the store, I feel differently. It's a process getting that bike together, getting it out of the garage, cleaning it, washing it. It's a process. It's not just go jump in the key and go. No, no, there's a process. And that's okay. But it has been an integral part of my therapy. It's been a powerful point of me feeling better about myself and me understanding myself. It's something like riding from here to Atlanta. It's 4 hours, right? But that 4 hours might change your life because anything could happen. You have to pay attention. You can't just zone off on a motorcycle. So you're connected, of course, to your motorcycle. You're connected to the road, but you're also connected to your thoughts. Your vibrations are changing with every mile. You can smell, you can feel every other few feet. The temperature changes outside, but you don't know that within a vehicle because the ambient temperature inside, you can't really feel it. You can feel that on a motorcycle. Every few feet there's a different smell. Every few feet there's a different temperature. It can go from 80 degrees outside to 70 something degrees within a few feet, and you can feel that change almost instantly. So these are things that your body is processing and is helping you through whatever you're going through mentally. It's not a cure, right? It's not a cure, but it's a really uh, pleasant experience in session at the same time.
Yeah, you mentioned, that, riding your bike, even if it's just from A to B,
Mhm.
how that has an impact on you. But what do the motorcycles like represent to the people you photograph, beyond, transportation or style?
Depending on if you're in a club or not, depending on how your motorcycle serves as a means of expression. See, this culture has allowed a lot of lateral movement. You can do a lot on a motorcycle. You can do a lot in a motorcycle club. You can do a lot in motorcycle culture. But you spend $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and upwards of that. That bike becomes part of your personality. See, you may not customize vehicles anymore. You know, you may have passed that level of admiration, you know, with your automobiles. But once you start customizing motorcycles and buying and riding motorcycles, you almost never stop until you just stop. So when you see someone and they've built something with their own two hands, or even they bought it with their own money, their connection with that motorcycle is unlike anything else. See, cars are just transportation, depending on how you feel about getting from A to B. But a motorcycle is a choice. It's almost never your only means of transportation. When you are on a bike, you're on that bike because that's what you want to do. That's your conscious decision. That's your choice. You're not just like, okay, well, this is my only way to get someplace. No, no. You made a decision to pick that means of and that mode of transportation. And it changes because you have to dress a certain way. You just can't run to the store real quick on a motorcycle. You're not wearing shorts and flip flops, no helmet, no gloves, not safely. And you're definitely not going to go for any amount of distance, you know, without that protection. So you have to be conscious about how you're going to embark on a journey. So it tends to allow you a closer connection to that machine because you have to take care of it because it has to take care of you.
And you mentioned, motorcycle clubs, and most people, including myself, don't know an awful lot about that culture and sort of like what is a motorcycle club? I mean, it might seem like a very elementary question to ask, but I think that for some viewers, it's worth kind of getting into like, what does that actually mean? Because I'm sure most people, their only idea of it comes from television or movies, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
So if you're in a fraternity, imagine the process of a fraternity, but at a motorcycle.
Hmm.
So however long you're a pro fight, or however long you're a because there's different terms um, in the motorcycle culture depending on what club you know you're in. You could be a prospect. You could be a prospect for 30 days. You could be a prospect for 60 days. You could be a prospect for 6 months, a year, however long, you know, until you prove yourself. So it's neophyte. My apologies. My sons are in fraternities. I was not. Um, it's it's interesting because you have to go through a lot to become part of this club, and there's so many to choose from. And it's you gravitate towards the club that makes the most sense to you, that makes you the most comfortable. Because there are outlaw clubs, there are one percenter clubs, there are clubs who just do charity rides, you know, for children. There are clubs who just run, to get coffee or beer, you know, on the weekends. And there are clubs that absolutely demand miles, that demand mandatory trips and things like that. So it really depends on the culture that you're a part, that you feel most speaks to your spirit and your style as a rider. So there's hundreds to choose from. You know, some of the oldest are black clubs in America. The East Bay Dragons are really old. Um, the Chosen Few are really old, and I mean by really old, I mean they were started in the 50s and 60s. So those clubs have been established for a very long time. Keep in mind, Harley Davidson as a brand was only started in 1903. So we weren't really riding up and down the road in 1903 as African Americans. There was a lot of things we didn't have access to. So our club started a little bit later, but they are nonetheless powerful.
Right, right. I want to talk a little bit about some of the social justice issues that you deal with in your work, and I think given all that's going on right now in the U.S., particularly in Los Angeles, just as a highlight, like one flashpoint moment, which is
Of course.
in history, in America's history, is like one of many. How does this work around biker culture, and kind of connect to broader social justice issues? And can you talk about some of your experiences being in places like Ferguson?
Man, I visited Ferguson from Charlotte 4 separate occasions. So right when Mike Brown was murdered, I got to Ferguson in about 48 hours from when it happened. So I drove straight from Charlotte there to document. Um, that was really my first understanding of what a wide scale uh, protest and resistance looked like, with brothers and sisters leading the charge. I mean, it's still, I believe, on record as being one of the longest lasting protests, because it was a number of years right? It never technically died down, from one year to another. It kept being reignited, so it kept going. It wasn't necessarily a boycott, so of course it's still, the Montgomery bus boycott, but this is one of the longest resistance points in the United States of America that's been documented, especially in recent history. But Ferguson was powerful. It was beautiful because it was resistance in poverty, right? It wasn't in Berkeley, where there were individuals of privilege, who, if it got rough, their parents could just, send them a helicopter or send them a car and get them out of there. If you were protesting in Ferguson, you lived around the corner, you lived around the block. So the same resistance that you had to have with the police officer you saw the next morning. You had to have the same resistance with, the sheriff, the next day. And that's a different level, when you live in a place. And that's where I learned my level of respect. That's where I learned how to take care of my community, being among them, living among them, spending time with them. It was scary, man. I'd never seen kettling before, so there may be several of you, however many, and you're just encompassed, you're just surrounded by law enforcement, and they basically force you into a bottleneck, and you're being moved. You're physically being moved. You can't approach them, right? So you're physically being moved to where they need you to be at, and then you're apprehended that way as your numbers are dwindling, right? So there could be 15 of you. By the time that they start making arrests, there may only be 3, right? Because they're steadily picking off individuals, the way I'd never seen that before. But after I could identify it, I could help, in other agencies and other instances of social justice where I know what that looked like. Do not allow them to surround you. But Ferguson wasn't just 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. People were sleeping outside, because some didn't have homes to go to. They were just like really adamant about what had taken place and how it was wrong, and how they were going to do everything within their power to stand up, for what they believe is right. And this is the first time I heard, well, they're burning down their own community. They're burning down their own community. We don't respect that. And one of the young brothers was like, hey, man, do you think we own that QT? Do you think a brother or a sister from this community owns that QT? He said, they're guests in our community, and they treat us worse than animals. So we're not burning down anything. We don't own it. We're guests, if anything, right? My mother pays rent here on Section 8. If something breaks bad, no one's going to live here. So, and I realized that during Charlottesville, right? I'm jumping ahead a little bit. One of their favorite sayings was like, well, there was no property damage. Well, 3 police officers lost their lives, and a young woman named Heather was killed. So there's 4 human casualties that mean less than property. And the more you understand about that, the more you understand how police officers move in the United States of America. See, they're
Right.
most likely protecting property. They're not protecting people. They don't have a charge to protect and serve you. It's protecting and serving property, which is what we used to be in America. So now my relationship with them is different. When I'm documenting protests, I'm not as naive, to what was going on. Oh, it's fine. If I'm not doing anything, it's not going to be a problem as long as I'm not breaking the law. Well, my existence is a problem, right? Me having a camera is documentation of laws possibly being broken by members of law enforcement, right? Encroaching on someone's rights. If you don't know what's going on, next thing you know, you're stuffed in a van, because someone said you did something. There's no due process, right? You're just right then and there. So I'm learning all of these things as I'm going. And Ferguson taught me a lot about political education. I'd always, I'd been radicalized in 3rd grade. I kind of knew what was going on ahead of time. But seeing this in real time, it's like, wait, this is still happening. We are literally walking out of our front door. This isn't some 3rd world country, and I use, with air quotes. They've always said America is a 3rd world country in a Gucci belt, which I believe now. Not even a real Gucci belt, which is also interesting. But seeing those things in real time just taught me and made me want to study more with a historical context. What did protests look like 100 years ago? What did protests look like 20 years ago, 30 years ago? What was it like in the 60s? What did our ancestors do? Since we aren't our ancestors, since we aren't them, what did they teach us? And I've never adopted that moniker. We are not our ancestors. We wish we were. We wish we were our ancestors. We wish we had the strength. We wish we had the political education. We wish we had the discipline, the respect, the love, the honor, the education. We wish we did. But Ferguson was a lot, man. And I kept going. it would spark up again, and I would go back down again. It would spark up again, and I would go back down again. And that was an interesting few years because it kept happening. Baltimore was right after that. It just kept happening.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We have some images that we're gonna get to, but while they're getting the slideshow ready, I have a follow-up question on that. So, what advice would you give to an up-and-coming photographer who wants to go to places that are flashpoints like Ferguson? I mean, obviously that could be a long, long conversation, but is there one or two things, tips, things you would say like be prepared for if you're going,
Yes.
to sort of document those
Mhm.
kinds of situations?
Ask yourself why you feel you are the individual that needs to be in that space. With all of the documentarians and photographers and social justice warriors in that particular community, why do you think your work is what's needed? Why do you think your presence? What are you going to add to the community? What are you going to add to the narrative? See, it's one thing to this is what you do, right? I when I first started, I was a photojournalist, right? Until a brother was like, okay, he said, well, are you on assignment? I said, no. He was like, oh, okay. He said, so did anyone send you? I was like, no. Okay. Do you have a narrative that you need to deliver, you need to bring back? I was like, no. He said, you're not a photojournalist. He said, and that's okay, but you're not. So then once I began to compartmentalize the work and what I was doing, I'm like, okay, now this starts to make sense. Because if you ask a individual that worked with a particular newspaper, they have shots they have to get. Hey, make sure you get someone, breaking a bottle. Make sure you get someone, destroying property. They have a list, right? If you're just there to document what's in front of you, that's a different that's a different level of responsibility. But why do you think you are the one that's supposed to be there? Don't get in the way, right? You don't have any more right to be there than anyone else, right? I have to get the photo. I have to get the photo. I have to do this. Now you're a problem, right? If you don't know how
Right,
to follow orders, right? And I mean orders, you're going to be orders. Somebody's going to tell you not to do something, and it's in your best interest not to do it in a community you don't belong to. You think that camera's going to keep you safe, right? You think that just because you have press, that you deserve to be someplace that people have repeatedly asked you not to be. But you don't understand that because you think you're going to get famous. What's going to happen is you're going to get hurt and your equipment is going to get damaged. And you may find yourself locked up or worse because you don't understand what's going on. You just want to take pictures. You just want to have fun until those handcuffs come out, until those billy clubs come out, until those rubber bullets that aren't actually rubber bullets. They're actual metal ball bearings that are encased what might as well be Tupperware, right? Because that's what a rubber bullet is. It's not a plastic pellet. It's not an airsoft pellet. It's a ball bearing that's encoded in plastic, which is very, 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 very thin. And it can and will hurt you. But you don't know that because you just want to capture photographs. You just want to be famous. You just want to be in the newspaper. You're going to be in the newspaper, all right. You're going to be in the newspaper. It's not going to be attached with a quote either if you play those type of games in those type of communities. I would
right,
say, I would say do a deep dive with yourself. Flip through, your little reasons why you want to be there, why you're going to spend money, why you're going to utilize resources that would best be someplace else, why you have to be on the ground. What are you going to add to the narrative? What are you going to add? How are you going to help? So someone asked me, and I'll answer this with this question. They were like, so how do you feel? Yeah, like how does this make you feel? I'm like, I'm with it. I just have a camera. I'm with whatever's going on. I'm physically with it. I'm not neutral, right? They're like, how do you remain neutral? Who said I was neutral? I'm with it. I just have a camera. Because when I'm accosted, right, by the police, they're not going to say, so what is your political opinion? They're going upside your head. While you're being stuffed in the back of the police car, you're being stuffed in the back of the van, they're not asking you your political opinion, right? They told you to leave, you didn't leave, or they didn't tell you to leave, and you're getting stuffed in the back of the van anyway. So you might as well be with it. That's what I would tell them. If you're not with it, don't go because you're not going to get a chance to tell your story. You're going to get stuffed into the
right,
back of the van or left on the side of the road with whoever else is getting left on the side of the road. And you have to realize that that's kind of what you signed up for. That's one of the dangers. It's not fun. It's not pretty. It's dangerous. It's scary. Lots of bad things can happen, but it's also exhilarating. Oh my God, it'll change your life. You will feel better than you've ever felt standing up for yourself and for people that look like you or for people who don't look like you, or for people who don't have your similar ideologies. You're a human being. That should be good enough. So if you can understand all of that, by all means, jump on the plane, get in the car, but just kind of, do a little bit of inventory on why you're doing what you're doing. And when it breaks bad, do you have a plan?
Right, right. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. Very, very important information. And I'm sure it's got people thinking hard. Let's talk about these images. We have quite a few, and I'd love for us to be
Of
able to
course.
get through them. So I guess what would be ideal is maybe you just take a moment. It doesn't have to be incredibly lengthy, but take a moment and share what you'd like about each image.
So, what's really beautiful about this photograph, my children, my son and my daughter, have been able to experience in person each of my photography exhibitions. First with No Justice, No Peace. Second with Brook Hill, and in a few days they'll be able to experience Black Behind Bars. So when there's graphics, like I usually photograph them right in front of the door graphics or in front of the wall graphics. So this was from Welcome to Brook Hill at the Gantt a few years ago. So that's my son and my daughter. So that was a very special day.
Fantastic. Let's advance to the next image, and I have a question about Brook Hill. So, what's the significance of, before we get to this image, what's the significance of Brook Hill for those who don't know?
So how about they just broke ground on another component of Brook Hill? Brook Hill has been a community that it was naturally occurring affordable housing. You hear affordable housing all the time. You'll always hear affordable housing. Well, Brook Hill started as affordable housing. It wasn't something that was raised. It wasn't something that was destroyed. People weren't pushed away in gentrification. It was always affordable housing, and it's right next to Southside Homes. Right off of Tryon Street. So they needed to be upgraded, right? But the way the land lease was set up, one person owned the buildings, the other person owned the land, and it was just kind of like, oh, we don't know. Investors were like, there's no real way that we can make money. It'd be great if we could do it, but there's no real way we can make money, so we don't know. And the city was like, well, if you don't know, we don't know. And the residents were like, well, what are y'all doing? And the city was like, well, we'll let you know in a minute. And other builders were like, yeah, but we're ready to go. But they were like, yeah, but we don't know if you can do it. And this was going on for a while. It was just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the residents was like, yeah, but I mean, what are y'all gonna do like about the living conditions here? Like, I mean, I hear what y'all are saying, but like, what's good? And we don't want to get kicked out either. So it was between who's going to build it and where the residents and how they're going to be taken care of and what's it going to look like and who's going to fund it and like all these things. And it just kind of got worked out the other day, and they just had groundbreaking for another component, which was beautiful. Um, Yesterday. So the story continues. They're going to upgrade it, and I believe, and I have to do the research a little bit more. I have to do the research. I've been busy, but I don't know the percentage of residents that are going to continue to be able to live there. But I believe there is a percentage, or there's a process that they go through to be able to still live there. So Brook Hill was one of my most heartfelt projects from beginning to end. I mean, I'm in there doing tours. Just people are in there just going through it, because it was so factual, right? It wasn't just emotions. There were facts, there were truth, like there was research done. The photographs, nothing there was artificial. Everything was authentic. I walked around in that community for weeks without my camera, just walking around, just getting to know people. Hey guys, I'm not the feds, I'm not the police. There's nothing to worry about. Just walking around, and because just because you're black, don't mean you're welcomed in the community, right?
Right.
And you got a camera, like, you them people. Well, I'm not. But walking around, and I was looking for a person. I was looking for a certain person I could connect with, and I did. And I end up really, really doing great work in a community that really means a lot to me to this day. Um, and we were able to change a lot, right? Like with the Gantt, with the city, there were so many conversations around affordable housing that weren't had before. If you look at the timeline in the news, and in the mainstream media from what was going on locally, affordable housing was at the beginning of every sentence, right? And that had never been done before. Poor people and people that were disenfranchised were just like, oh, that was an afterthought. And that was an afterthought. But they knew when people started advocating for themselves, they had to do some things differently. And I was really proud to be a part of that. And it won a bunch of
That's,
awards.
oh, that's fantastic. So the image we have here, yeah, I'm gonna assume that this is Michigan.
It is. It is.
So
Coldest
so
day of the
yeah,
year.
share what you can.
Absolutely. So, a friend of mine, who's actually a legal pundit on CNN, his name is Charles Coleman. He was having a birthday, and we basically had 10 activations right around America that we went and just donated our time and did nonprofit work around those issues. Flint was one of those issues. Tell me why we showed up in Flint, Michigan in the coldest day of the year in like forever. I'm talking it was brick. I'm talking like I don't know how I survived. I left a place where the wind hurt my face. Why am I back here? But we delivered a semi trailer full of water for free to the people. It was gone. It was gone within hours. I mean, if you imagine how many pallets are in a semi trailer, we just dropped the water off and we donated it. We partnered with a church that was really integral in the community. Those pastors and that pastor's family is not at that church anymore, but we partnered every time we went to a community. We partnered with a leading nonprofit organization that was really in the streets. So we did that. Brought the water. I mean, again, it was so cold, bro. It was so ridiculously cold, but it was important. I mean, because that's really, what I remember. If you look at my face, I'm from Illinois, but it was ridiculous. See, I had forgot. Remember, Cat Williams said you have to buy a coat in Chicago. Well, I didn't buy that coat in Flint. That coat I had in Charlotte, and it was being hastily disrespected. The coat was being disrespected, Dexter. It was ridiculous. But
Yeah,
yes, we delivered water to Flint.
it was funny because you just brought up a memory. The coldest, one of the coldest experiences I ever had was in Detroit, and it was a long time ago, but it was very memorable.
It doesn't make any sense how cold it is. People are like, it's colder. Dude, it's cold. Lake Michigan is right there. What is wrong with y'all? Like the lake
Yeah,
effect is real. Until you see waves freeze, you've never been cold.
yeah, I remember seeing the snow. I was in I was actually on Fifth. I was on 5 Mile
Yeah,
in Detroit, and
yeah.
we opened the door, and the snow, it was snowing, but here's the thing, because of the wind, it was snowing down the street. It wasn't snowing, if the snow wasn't falling,
No, no, it was
all of the
blowing.
snow was
Yeah,
running down, was running
it doesn't
down
make
the
any sense.
street.
I don't. Yeah, I don't.
Anyway,
I don't
let's
know.
go to the next image.
Yes, sir. So that is the epicenter. Keep in mind, I was in Minneapolis during the George Floyd protest. I don't like saying the George Floyd protest, but that's the
Right,
easiest way, to reference them
right,
because they weren't protesting George Floyd.
right,
Um,
right.
but I guess Charlotte, or at the very least, this particular hashtag was in solidarity, and Charlotte was actually hosting protests in the city. And I was like, that was pretty interesting because I had just got back from Minnesota, and I mean the photograph behind me, actually, the one that's I don't know if you can see it over my shoulder. That's Minnesota. That the city was basically just on fire, and I was right there. I was actually injured there. I didn't break my ankle, but I kind of probably should have. It probably would be feeling better now. But I was there, and I fell off the curb essentially, right? Like it's not even a sexy story. It's not even like this super dope story. There was some brothers that were like, "Man, I wish somebody would, man, da da da," and bump me. Two big brothers, bump me, and the curbs in Minnesota are high, and I rolled my ankle. I'm on the ground, just I can't breathe. I'm in excruciating pain. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm probably gonna die. Like I'm gonna get trampled. So a car's gonna run over me. Like this is bad. So I eventually got to safety, but those protests, man, I never seen anything like it. Folks were turning up. Do you hear me?
Mm,
I'm talking about white people. I'm talking. There's a really strong Somalian population there. Folks were turning up. You know, everybody was just like, look, we're tired of this, and we're going to do something about it. So that was a beautiful moment in time. What I mean by that is, to me, this is me. Resistance is beautiful, right? I didn't
mm.
say protest is beautiful. I didn't say anarchy. No, no, no. Resistance, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
beautiful
yeah,
to me.
yeah, for sure. Let's go to the next image. And I'm moving fast because I don't want us to
No
run out of
worries.
time.
No worries.
Yeah.
This was in Alabama. One of my sons attends Alabama State and Birmingham and Alabama. This is the the I forgot the name of that museum. You seen the movie Just Mercy?
Yep.
Yes. So Brian Stevenson has this nonprofit, has this company. It's the Equal Justice Institute, I believe,
Yeah.
EJU or EJI. Yeah. So
From
those glass, yeah, the Legacy Museum. Those glass bottles were dirt taken from where there were confirmed lynchings. So all of those bottles, and there's two from Charlotte. You know, there's definitely two from Charlotte from where Bank of America Stadium is. There's two right there right now, but all of those are glass jars from the dirt where our ancestors were lynched and or murdered, and they were able to confirm them. So that's what those glass jars represent.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, the without going off on a tangent, the history of slavery and then Jim Crow and quote unquote, well, slavery reconstruction and Jim Crow in America, there's so much just taken for granted that people think they know. I
Hmm.
find that when I have conversations with people, particularly, especially non-Americans, but certainly even in America, a lot of people treat it as though they kind of know the whole story and there's nothing left to talk about. But when
Yeah.
you start peeling back to the facts of the situation, the true picture is so different than what people really believe. It's hard for people to get their head around that level of terrorism, that level of fear, that level of injustice, that level of sort of casual violence.
Hmm.
And I mean, I don't recommend that everyone subject themselves to the brutal, you know, facts and documents on for every single thing because I think that some people may not be able to manage it.
Right. Of
But I
course.
would just say that if you think and this is not me being on a high horse because I'm learning every day, but if you think you know the whole story of Jim Crow and just lynchings as a subject in America,
Yeah.
like like do yourself a favor and go a little bit deeper because there's so much more to it. There's like so much more to it.
Bro,
And
I
yeah.
thought I thought the Edmund Pettus Bridge was the length of the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm thinking
Mhm.
this thing is so humongous, right? Until you see it. And it's like, wait a minute. The law enforcement were beating the brakes off our ancestors on a sidewalk, essentially.
Mhm.
Like I'm thinking there's tens of, I mean, in your mind, right? Like you don't know the scale. You're
Yep.
thinking bridge. You're thinking, from New
Mhm.
Jersey to New York. You're
Yes.
not thinking. No, I'm serious, right? You're like, yo, they walked. Man, they, man. You like, wait a minute, and you see the movies because you don't, there's the documentation isn't following them. You know what I mean? It's not right there, right, bruh. So if that's my body. It's a 2 lane bridge, bro. It's not even a 4 lane. It's 2 lanes.
Right. Right.
What are we talking about? But folks were getting the brakes beat off of them trying to get from one side to the other. But you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
see it.
And the bravery one had to have to confront police at that you got to have bravery now and anytime. But the level of bravery one had to have during a time of s- sanctioned
Yeah.
like 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 the police today can do things and get away with it with impunity, but not all the time.
Right. Right.
Then it was all the time.
Hmm. Anytime they felt like it,
Right?
reckless
Like
abandon.
all the time. So the bravery you had, yeah, yeah, the bravery you had to have then was at a different level because the violence was guaranteed. It wasn't a possibility.
No, it was happening.
It was built into, it was built into the system. And then you see some of those images where you have women that are literally 65, 70 years old,
In
and the way and the
dresses.
way they and the way they're being treated. It's I don't know, man. I think this is an offline conversation we could have because
Yeah, no, it's hey, James Baldwin said to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time.
yeah,
So you walking around just mad because you know even just a little bit of what's going on. And the more you know,
Yeah,
the angrier you get,
yeah,
and you wish you
yeah,
had known any of it.
yeah, yeah. And then you think about it. We can go to the next image, and then you think about it, and why. And I'm glad we're going back to the biker culture because the
Yeah,
subject we're talking about now.
you're welcome.
But the thing about it is so wild to me is that I'm always reminded of the timeline on these things. So you and I were born relatively around the same time, and like the timeline on these things, it's like we're just talking about things that were happening 5 years before we were born. It's not like we're talking about some, like, ancient ancient occurrence.
It was last
If
week.
you yeah you were born 12 years earlier, you'd have been there.
Yep.
So anyway, um, let's discuss the image here. And is this part of the show that's currently on view at the Get?
It is not. This is a kind of a personal image. I don't have enough photographs of me actually riding. I have photographs of everyone else enjoying the culture. So when I get an opportunity to have a portrait of myself doing what I love, I'm absolutely all in. And this is actually one of the images that is on the Black Behind Bars T-shirts that are currently in the Gantt Center. This is just the color version of it. So the one inside is black and white, but that is the image from it.
Okay, so in our final moments here, I have a couple of like technical questions I'd like to ask you because I think
Sure.
it might be helpful for those who are watching this now or later who are interested in some of the things you're interested in.
Mhm.
So start let's start with uh, let's start with motorcycles first. If someone wanted to get started in riding, what do you recommend they do? Is there a particular kind or size of bike or process that you would tell someone? And this is again is someone who's like doesn't have any experience. What do you tell them?
Absolutely. I would take a course. I would either go to one of our local colleges. I believe, well, Harley Davidson has courses and classes. It costs a couple dollars, but it helps and it lowers your insurance. It helps you with just getting used to the motorcycle. They allow you to actually use their motorcycles, which will be a lot smaller than the one you see here. That bike weighs 800 pounds. It's going to do what it's going to do, right? When you're learning, you want to ride something that's not going to be intimidating, right? So you can get the mechanics down. You don't want to be scared and that thing goes flying off down the road. You on it or off it. So I would definitely recommend every single individual interested to take the course, whether it's one, like I said, at a local college or one at one of our local dealerships. I would absolutely recommend that before you do anything. Don't even worry about the kind, the size, whatever. Don't even worry about your budget. Find out how that thing works first. Get your license and kind of get used to it that way, and then pick out a bike and the one that you can afford. Right? If you got 10 grand, go find your $10,000 bike. You got 20 grand, go find a $20,000 bike. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get hurt. Period. It's not like, oh, you need a smaller bike. No, you need to learn how to ride, right? You're going to fall
Mm,
off of anything if you're going to fall off. Right now, I'm not saying go buy the biggest, baddest, fastest bike in the whole world. No, don't do that. Right? You don't give a brand new driver a Lamborghini, right? But you'll
right,
stall it before you wreck anything, right? You're not even going to
right.
drive it properly. You're going to end up cutting it off in traffic before you end up, getting up to enough speed and losing control. So it's more learning how that thing works before you do anything.
And my thank you. And my final question. Well, let's advance to the next image. I think we might have one or two more. I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. So one more question, um, and this has to do with photography. So obviously, 99% of people out there have a phone that has some sort of camera in it, right? I don't even think unless you consciously buy a flip phone because you want to, I don't think they make phones without cameras anymore, you know? Um, but having a camera on your phone and being a photographer, professional photographer, are often very different things. And so if someone wants to make the leap into becoming more professional, what similar to the bike, like what are the couple of pieces of advice you would give them? Is there a type of camera or next step beyond like the next best iPhone?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would recommend the budget first with that, right? Do not buy a brand new camera. It's not necessary. I would recommend mirrorless, right? A mirrorless camera, Sony makes them, Fuji makes them, Olympus makes them, Nikon makes them, Canon makes them. It allows you to make your changes on the fly. And the picture that you capture is a picture that you see on the LCD screen or the picture you see through the viewfinder. So if you're just figuring this thing out, a DCLR, a DSLR, you capture it and you're like, okay, wait, that's not it. Well, you knew that wasn't the right photo when you looked at it through your viewfinder or you looked at it, through the actual screen. So a mirrorless you can get used. You can get one for $200-300. Do not go crazy. Just get something with manual control so you can dial some of those things down yourself or dial some of those things up yourself. Do not go spend all of your money because you're not going to spend it the right way. You can just get a regular, small, starting out, budget-friendly camera that you could find anywhere. But I would recommend getting one secondhand. Anytime you press one shutter, it's used. One shutter click is used. Used camera. You might as well, get you something to save you some money. So there's nothing in particular. I'm not brand fond. I mean, I do have Sony, I do have Fuji, but I've also used Nikon. But I use Sony and Fuji now. I would get something for $300, right?
Okay.
The most important aspect of a camera is the lens. You get you a little something called a nifty 50. You can get one for $100 used. That 50 millimeter lens is going to change your life because it has an aperture of about 1.8. 1.8 is this much light. Light is everything in photography. That lens is going to mean more than your fancy camera. You can have a super fancy camera and a not so quality lens, and the photos are going to be underwhelming, in addition to you not knowing what you're doing. So spend less on the camera, less on the camera body, more on the lens. Start with a 50 millimeter or 35 millimeter if you can afford it. Buy it pre-owned. It will change your life.
Fantastic advice. Fantastic advice. So this has been really great, man. I recommend everyone follow you on social media, kind of get to know your work a bit more if they don't know it. Is there anything you'd like to share about the exhibition at the Gantt Center, your journey in putting that together, like as final words? Like, was there any catharsis moment? Was there some surprising aha moment? How did it change you?
Man, what I'm telling you, the cornerstone moment was I want to place my first Harley Davidson motorcycle inside the exhibition. Like I wanted my physical first Harley Davidson motorcycle that I've ever owned inside the exhibition. What does that look like? Um, what needs to be a part of the bike? What needs to be part of the story? Where to place it? Inside the exhibition. That was huge. That was expensive. That was time consuming. And it's also being without something. That's the longest I've ever been without my bike. I have to go see it. I have another one, right? The one I was riding is another one, but I have to go look at it in a museum to even touch it, to even see it. So being without it, that's the longest I've been without that bike since I've had it. So, something, I want to, something in an exhibition. Yeah, but do you have another one? Because the one you have is going to be under lock and key, until the end of that contract. So that was an interesting, I didn't think of it that far ahead. I wanted people to see it, but also I kind of want to ride it. Like I kind of want to switch it out. I don't know. Like I think if I put the other one in, do you think
That's
people would
cool.
notice? Like if I switch it out, like do you think people would be like, because it's black? They're not gonna know. They're gonna know. They're probably gonna know. They're probably gonna know.
Well, listen, Alvin, I really appreciate you joining us today. I'm about to get into our final words, but I just want to say, I'm really excited for you, excited for your journey. It's great how you've been able to bring all these different kinds of experiences together and really stay rooted in the things that you're passionate about, outside of documenting or photographing the external world. So much of what you do is also about what's going on with you internally. I think that's really amazing. And I just want to congratulate you on the show at the Gantt Center and everything else that you have coming up. So, my final words, as usual, is the Gantt Center's goal is always to provide programs that inform and inspire. The support of viewers like you allows the Gantt Center to expand its reach and further develop programs like today's Open Air. You can lend your support to the Gantt Center by visiting ganttcenter.org/donate. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel for future programs and other video content updates. We want to thank you all for joining us for another great conversation, and we look forward to next month's Open Air. Good night. Have a wonderful evening.